Hi, my name is Panav Mhatre, and I'm the host of the Spot Robotics Podcast. Welcome. It's been a while since the last one, but I've been working hard to get some cool guests and improve the overall episode quality. Today, I'm joined with my guest, Mr. Ryan Hughes, discussing software startups and software engineering. This was super informational, and he brought some unique takes on the startup founder experience. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast where you can gain insight into technology in the modern world and get a new perspective and advice on succeeding in these fields. If you enjoyed the podcast, follow us on wherever you get your podcast, and if you'd like to support us even more, give us a review. Thank you and enjoy. Okay, so the first question I had was related to what you're currently doing, which is Pier Labs. And if I'm correct, you started it a few months ago. So I just wanted to basically ask, what motivated you to do that, and if you could explain a little bit more about what it is for the viewers.
Yeah, for sure. I've always had an interest in the startup world. Always been building stuff, all sorts of projects over the years. It's really cool to be able to build something from scratch instead of just being tasked with keeping an existing product running and optimized and um, you know and that's kind of what you'll see at some of the larger companies. I was at Google for a while. I was working on advertisements, and a lot of the work I did there was just keeping the advertisement system running. And so there was a lot of new laws that were in place then, like CCPA and GDPR. So we just had to keep the system running, keep the money machine printing money. And one of the reasons I really jumped out and doing my own thing is because it's exciting. We get to build stuff. We get to work with the people we want to work with. And it's exciting.
I guess one question I had was, what made you? I guess since I think you had you had an idea in college as well,
Yeah.
but I guess one of the things was, what made you want to start it right now compared to any time before or after?
Yeah. I think let's see. I've always been building stuff. I don't think there's a great answer for that. I totally could have done it earlier. I had that project I was working on in college. In college, I was really focused on landing great internships. So I put a lot of effort into that and was able to get some, high company brands, some internships at, the brand name companies. I think if I had to say anything, I think I undervalued how valuable some startup experience can be, even though you don't get that brand name company on your resume. And so, I was working on a project in college called Search NEU, which is still used by thousands of users at Northeastern. And yeah, I mean, it was great. It was like a side hobby then. I didn't focus on it a lot, but it was still fun to be able to take something from zero and grow it to what it is today.
So I guess the next question would be, what inspired you to pursue a career in software engineering, and how did you get into that field? What was the first moment where you felt like that was something you wanted to do?
I've been in software engineering for a very long time, since before high school, really. I started messing around with it and building random stuff, writing some code. In high school, I did this robotics competition called Vex Robotics, which we build these robots, and there's teams of 4, and we had 20 or 30 some people working in our high school program and competing. We'd travel all around the country to go to these competitions. And so that was I'd say the first serious adventure of software engineering, and there's a lot of mechanical engineering and strategy there as well. And then I loved it and just kept going. I've kind of always known I wanted to get into computer science, and I've stayed with it basically ever since.
I had one question. So I looked at your background, and you had a study abroad thing. Could you tell us a little bit about that? What was that about?
Sure. So I went to Singapore for a semester in, I think it was 2018. It was really cool. It was actually the first time I'd ever been to Asia. And it's just so much different than North America, where I grew up and where I currently am. So I was just, the culture is different. You meet, all sorts of new, interesting people. We did a lot of traveling around the Southeast Asia. When I was out there, we went to Thailand and Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia. And so it was really cool to see all the things that are different over there versus as compared to here.
That's really cool. The next the next question I had was, I think you mentioned this, but in college you started up the Search Northeastern,
Mhm.
and I just wanted to like know what made you come up with that idea. And I'm pretty sure like it merged with something else. So like, could you tell us a little bit more how like you got like that, how that merged and what it
I
does right now?
originally started the project because the website that Northeastern had, where students can go and check out like the course catalog and when classes are happening and who's teaching the class and when the exams are, was really clunky and outdated. Specifically, I wanted to sign up for a class, and the class was full. And so I went to the academic advisor, and they're like, "Well, is there any way to get me in?" And they're like, "Okay, so here's what we're going to do. You should just go back to the website and check every single day to see if anybody drops out of the class, and then you can snag their seat." And I'm like, "Well, I'm a computer science major. I'm not just going to be sitting here, manually checking this website every single day to see if a seat opens up." So wrote a little script to do it, and then a bunch of my buddies were interested in as well. And then I just started building it out a lot more past that, to not only solve that specific problem, but also just other usability issues around just accessing data from the site. And so I spent like a while actually building the whole infrastructure out. So we'd pull all the data from Northeastern's website, and then put it into another database hosted on Amazon Web Services. And then we had a front end where people could go and access the data. Took a few iterations, and then we got to the site where it currently is today.
Is it currently running?
It is, yeah. You can go there right now. It's searchneu.com.
Okay, I'll look at that after.
So after a few years, we added some more features. Then it was when I was graduating, and so I wanted to pass off this college project to students who were younger than me who were still at the college. And I didn't want to work on it like after I was graduating, right? So I was basically found these great group of students that were making a student organization called Sandbox at the time. And they were looking for projects to take on. They were looking to basically grow their new student organization. They actually just founded the student organization like the very semester I was graduating, and it was like 6 of them at the time. And so I was like, sure, you guys can have the project. And they took it and ran with it. And not only did they, build up the project a lot, keep it running, and add all of the new latest semesters as Northeastern added them, they also built out a lot of other projects as well, and got a lot more people involved in their student organization too. It's now at 50 people, I believe.
That's really cool. The next question I had was related to, I guess, your past like experiences with Google and Snapchat. Was there anything that you learned from there that really impacted you today at Pier?
I would just say like there's a big difference between all of these different companies. At some of the bigger companies like Snapchat and Google, things tend to move a little slower. They tend to build less like amazing new innovative stuff. The big priorities for Google, well, as I mentioned before, is just keep the lights on. Like that was literally like the Q4 goal was keep the lights on, and that isn't super exciting. And I wanted to work on something that was really exciting to build stuff. And it's just what I'm doing now is basically like the polar opposite. It's just like 4 of us right now trying to get this thing off the ground. There's very little structure, and we're just running around working on projects, and trying to get some revenue, which is very cool.
Very cool. I guess one thing that I guess like you talked about, like these are top tier companies that a lot of college graduates really want to get into. So I guess what was something that you believed that like stood you out compared to other people that really, I mean, you're technically not going to know what exactly led you to that internship, but what would be something that you believe could have led you to that internship?
Yeah, I had a lot of internships in college as well at these various brand name companies. So I think that helped when I was trying to go for the full-time job at Google. Having that big project Search NEU to talk about during interviews and on the resume was fantastic as well. Yeah, I mean, initially it's just difficult. The interviews are really important. And there's a lot of competition for getting jobs at these companies. But I guess one thing, if I just had to add anything, it would just be like, I think, if there's a lot of really cool startups out there, and a lot of times you can learn more and it can be more exciting, and you'll work with people that are more passionate about like what they're working on as compared to folks you're going to find at some of these larger companies. So that's basically what I've been seeing now, and that's what's led me into the startup world.
Okay. I guess the next thing was like emotional, since we had like someone emotional also come on the podcast. I guess what was could you tell us a little bit about emotional? Like what did you do at emotional?
Sure. Let's see, was it Akshay by chance who came on the podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know him from Emotional.
Yeah.
Here in the Boston area.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I was working on the metrics team at Emotional. So basically, these self-driving cars would drive around the city, and they collect lots of data. It's camera data, lidar data, radar data, GPS, and they, after driving around for just like an hour or two, they'd have like a terabyte of data that they collected. So we need to basically churn through all this data, ingest it, figure out. Specifically, we worked on an internal-facing dashboard to figure out like where the cars were successfully working, where the cars maybe needed some improvement on, what type of situations the cars handled really well, or maybe need some improvement on as well. And so we did a lot of internal metrics and data churning.
That's cool. I guess I didn't ask you about like what you did at Google or Snapchat. I was like, I guess what was something you did at Google? Like, what was your job at Google?
Yeah, so at Google, I was working on the display ads team. And so these are the box ads that you see all around the internet on sites like New York Times and Wall Street Journal. Specifically, these are the ones that have the little blue icon in the corner that are powered by AdSense. I was on the front end team. And so there's a little piece of JavaScript that's made by Google that runs on these websites that downloads ads and displays them. So I was working on that little piece of JavaScript. And so we actually had a surprising number of engineers working on that code. There was 20 of us, which might seem like a lot, but that's how big companies are. There's a lot of people that work on even the littlest things. But yeah, we did a lot of tweaking of all sorts of features, a lot of optimization. The privacy laws change a lot, and so that influences a lot of the work we do as well. So let's say some new country or some state here in this country creates a new privacy law, and there's new things that we have to do to handle cookies. We will update the code to be in compliant with that law.
And then that's really cool. I worked the AdSense once. Like I've seen that piece of JavaScript before. The next thing was like with Snapchat. I went to what you do at Snapchat? Like
I was working on the security team there. So just like Motional, it was also an internal facing web application. Specifically, it was an internal tool that folks used that other engineering teams would use to get privacy and security approval before their new feature went to production. And so in the entire company, if you were like some engineering team, maybe the camera team working on like the camera part that went on the Snapchat app, you wanted to launch some new feature, you had to make sure it was secure and privacy sensitive before it gets to production. So you come to our team, you go to our portal, type in a bunch of information on what data your feature is accessing and how it accesses it, and we'll give it the stamp, and then off it goes to production.
That's cool. The next question was for those who are, I guess, about to graduate high school or still in high school, coming, or I guess like even coming into college, what would be some advice you would give to like pursue like the field you're in, and to maybe even like do a startup like you?
Yeah, I would say find something you're interested in and just go for it. Like full send it. Don't like tiptoe around it a little bit. Like, oh, maybe, and then just all go all in. So don't drop out of college or anything until like you're making 6-7 digits or something. But just try it out. If you really like startups, get an internship at a startup. There's some really top startups out there that are a wonderful learning experience, and it's great to try things like when you're younger too, because then you kind of quickly figure out like what you like doing and then what you don't like doing. And the worst position to be in is, let's say, you haven't figured that out yet, and you're 24, 25, 26, 27, and you're like, don't know what to do with your career. Well, you got to start then, right? And so you might as well just answer the question when you're, 20, 21, or even younger than that. It's like, at some point you have to answer the question of like, what are you going to do with your life? And you might as well kind of figure it out sooner rather than later.
That's some great piece of advice right there. The last question I really had was related to. I usually ask this to everyone: is when you look back at like the journey you've taken from like way back then, what is something you look at that you felt you could have changed or done better, or something like you reflect upon, pretty much?
Yeah, I mean, throughout my time at college, I think I went um, straight to like the big brand name tech companies a lot. Like if you look at my resume, it's like all these big
Mm-hmm.
brand name tech companies, and after being at them for a few years, I'm just like, this is like all the hype was not really worth it. Like being on the inside there, I mean, it wasn't super exciting. We weren't building, cool, amazing new products. And personally, I'm just like much more excited by the work that happens at the startup. You meet people that are really passionate about what they're building on. They're like, oh, I'm going to build this. It's going to solve all these problems for all these people all around the world. It's going to be amazing. So that's really exciting. You do actually get to build the really cool stuff as well. And you just meet, really interesting people too. So I really like startups. I think that's great. And I just say, like, if I had to do something over again, it would just be go towards the startup sooner. And kind of, I want to say, like, more so ignore the lull of like the big companies.
Mm-hmm. I guess I know it was my last question, but I just thought of something right now. I know, like, would you say like Motional was considered like, did it have startup culture? Because I know it was like solving something relatively like
Yeah, it
new for that.
when I was there, it was around 1,200 people.
Hmm.
So that's, mid
Yeah,
to small size company. Obviously, the companies I was at earlier are massive. Like
yeah.
Google has like 100,000 employees, and Snapchat has a ton as well. Um, so Emotional, yes, definitely has a lot of startup culture. There's definitely a lot less bureaucracy there than you could find at, a Google or Facebook or an Apple. Um, there's definitely, I saw a culture of like, anyone can just kind of, if you think, even if you're like more of like an entry level engineer and you think something's cool and be amazing, you can 100% just propose it and go and build it. And I worked on a number of projects where I saw this problem. It wasn't like one of the tasks that was assigned to me. It was just something else that somebody else was struggling with, and I'm like, I can build a solution for that. So I went and tried to make it happen.
So I mean, so I know you moved from like a big company like Snapchat to Emotional. Was there like how was there like something different in the shift from like there to there? Like how did it feel from shifting from a huge company to something like a little startup? I guess like in startup culture.
Yeah, the culture is definitely different. I think
Mm-hmm.
in big companies, it's very clear like what you have to do and how you have to do it. To the point where it can be kind of boring if you get like this very long list of instructions and it's just like do this, then do this, then do item 3, and then do item 4. Just like, oh, okay. Startups, I would say, are definitely like, there's less process, there's less bureaucracy, there's less kind of instructions given to you. But a lot of times the problems that need to be solved are still very much there. Um, so I'd say that's like the two extremes. And so Emotional, being in the middle a little bit, yes, there's, instructions and on what you need to do, but then you also do get the good mix of like, oh yeah, there's just some problems there, and you can just build a solution if you want to, go for it. So I think it's pretty cool.
Okay. I had actually one question. So when I know a lot of people think of like top companies, and as you mentioned, like top companies aren't, I guess, something like they're not the most interesting. So I guess one aspect I like, since you're a startup founder, my question would be, how would you recommend someone to get like to land and to work for a startup? Like, what would be something they could do to to land up with a startup?
Um, I think what I look for in a lot of candidates, and I think what a lot of other startups do too, is basically just like, projects that you've worked on and stuff that you've built and made, and really just something that shows that you have a lot of interest in the startup world, and building things and making things. If you look at the questions that Y Combinator asks on their startup application, it's not just about the idea and the thing that you want to build, but they also ask about like, tell me about yourself. What are some of the projects you've worked on, and what are some of the interesting things that you've done? So I think that'll help stand out as well. But there's a lot of startups out there. And like the big companies are all kind of similar. You go at one of the brand name ones, it'll be a pretty similar interview process, mostly similar culture. Startups, it's kind of like the Wild West to some degree. So like they're really good startups that are going to be like really hard to get into. And the really top quality investors and people with like tons of experience at other startups that did really well. And then there's just kind of like this very large tail end of startups. And so if you're just trying to break into startups, even if you can't get like the top startup, right off the bat, maybe you could go to like the second tier startups and then go there for a little bit, learn a lot. And then maybe you can go to the top tier startup after that. Or maybe your second tier startup then becomes a top tier startup because it starts doing really well financially. You also just meet a ton of people in the startup world, and it's always great to have connections as well.
What's the hardest challenge being, I guess, like a software startup? Like, because I know there's like a bunch of companies that, like a bunch of startups in that field. What's the biggest challenge you feel? Is it like oversaturated? Like, what is like something you feel?
I'm sure it depends on the startup. So, yeah, there's definitely some industries that are oversaturated. There's a ton of AI and ML startups these days. Everybody wants an AI assistant for this, that, and the other thing. If you're trying to compete head on with like another startup that's doing the same thing as that you have an idea for, but they're like 3-4 years ahead of you, already raised $10 million. That's probably not worth working on. Maybe you should join their team instead. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to pinpoint like an exact problem because the problems vary so widely. There's so many different startups working on so many problems across so many industries.
Okay, those are all the questions I had. Appreciate that. I guess I always end off like with one